Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful, creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we can meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the horrific murder of beloved school teacher Melissa Jenkins. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Now, before we get into the details of today's case, I first need to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Aura. Have you ever wondered before why you get so many emails from companies you've never heard of, or calls or texts from numbers that just seem a little bit off? Well, that is because there are these things out there called data brokers that are making billions of dollars off of selling your personal and private information to people you don't want to have it, like scammers and marketers. Now, they are legally required to remove your information if you ask them to, which sounds great, except they make the process of removal super difficult and confusing on purpose, and that's one of the ways in which Aura comes in. Aura automatically removes your information from these sites, and look at how many of these sites can have your information. Like, I don't know who that's them is, but they have my personal and private information without my permission, and Aura helps me remove it. Okay, that's one of the ways in which they help. They remove your information from these sites. They make sure your information stays off of these sites. They do all the hard work so that you don't have to. And that's not all they do either. Aura is like all-in-one digital security. You can get alerts if your personal information is found on the dark web. You can get time fraud alerts for credit and banking. You can get a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more. And if anything does happen, because, life does find a way, Aura has US fraud experts available 24/7. So you get all the online protection you could ever need or want in one place. And that is why I recommend Aura. Now listen, I don't want to leave myself exposed and vulnerable. I have to imagine that you don't want that for yourself either. So if all of this sounds as good to you as it does to me, make sure to click the link at the top of my description box. That's aura.com/Bratterstein to try Aura out for free for 14 days and see if your personal and private information has been exposed online. And if it has, let Aura help you put a stop to it today. Now, I just want to say a big thank you to Aura for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Aura that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock, don't ever change. Now, this video is on a case that was actually suggested to me by a member of the Brat Pack, named Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Thank you, Chelsea. And this case is actually a hometown suggestion for her. This murder is what it is. It happened in Chelsea's hometown. Prior to Chelsea's suggestion, I had actually never heard of Melissa Jenkins or her murder. And now that I have heard about it, read all about it, read so many things about it, I'm just like, wow, it's a very upsetting case. It's a very scary case because Melissa seemed to be just such a good person. And being a good person was her downfall in the end, which is a scary thing to consider because we're all just trying to do the best we can to be better people than we were yesterday. And in her case, that ended up costing her her life. And then the reasoning, I'm using that so loosely, behind why she was killed is horrifying. So today I'm going to tell you that entire story. I read all the things so that you do not have to. And now at the end of this video, I want you to answer a question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain as we go through all the details. But I don't want you to answer it till you, have the information to, come to an informed decision. But the question of the day is this. Who do you believe was the mastermind, the primary aggressor in the murder of Melissa Jenkins? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after we go through this entire case. Now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the horrific murder of beloved school teacher, Melissa Jenkins. I want to start this video off with a quote from the judge who presided over Melissa Jenkins' murder trial. The judge said of her murder, and I quote, "They hunted their victim as a pair. This was a hunt and they were acting as a pair, a pack of two. It couldn't be done without both." Our story begins in St. Johnsbury, which is a tiny town in Vermont, about 40 miles away from the Canadian border. It was March 25th, 2012 at about 11:30 p.m. when a call came in to 911. This call was from a man named Randy who was calling because he was concerned about his ex-girlfriend. I guess at around 9 p.m., his ex-girlfriend, which was Melissa, had called him and told him that somebody she knew was having car trouble, so she was driving over to help them. And something about the interaction, something about the phone call was so strange to her that she wanted to call somebody and let them know where she was going just in case. So hours went by and Melissa never called him back. And he was worried because she had been concerned when she called. So he called her over and over and she never answered the phone. So he was getting concerned. He got so concerned that when his roommate Carl came home, he was like, "Hey, can you drive me over to Melissa's? Because I'm worried about her." And he's like, "Sure, yeah, let's go." So they drive over. And while they're on their way, they get a very eerie sinking feeling in their stomach when they see that Melissa's car is pulled over to the side of the road in like a pull off section of the road. You know what I'm talking about? Sure. Of an area on Goss Hollow Road. Carl then pulls the car over and Randy jumps out. They both jump out and they're like, "What is going on?" It's clear that Melissa's not in the car. They can tell from the distance that she's not there. The car's just like down the street from her house, but she's not in it. But they can see that the car is still running and they're like, "That's really weird." But as they approach the car, they know then, without a shadow of a doubt, that something horrible has happened. Because as they get closer, they see that Melissa's son, her 2-year-old son Ty, is asleep in the back seat. He's soaked in sweat and totally alone. And they're like, "Oh man, something is really wrong here." And that is when Randy called the police. Police then rushed to the scene. And just to illustrate how small this town was, one of the cops that ended up coming that night was actually off duty. He had gone home, he had gone to sleep, and they called him in and were like, "We need you to come in," because like there aren't that many officers. So all the police get there, and the first thing they do, like the main focus, is making sure Ty is okay. And luckily he was, even though he was left alone sleeping in this car for God knows how long, he was okay and he was taken to stay with a family friend and eventually ended up with Melissa's parents. But once he was taken care of and he was off the scene, police started trying to process the scene and find any evidence that they could. But I mean, it's 11:30 at night, so it is dark by now. It was clear to investigators that something had happened and that it had been out of Melissa's control. They were able to determine right away that like there was still gas in her car, so it's not like her car ran out of gas and she like walked off to a gas station, which would she have done that and left her son? No, but they have to look at all possibilities. And there were signs at the scene that somebody else had been there. There were footprints and tire tracks in the ground near Melissa's car, and the tire tracks looked as if somebody had peeled out quickly away from Melissa's car. On the ground, there was also a red and black baseball cap that didn't belong to Melissa. There was her smashed cell phone and nearby just one of her shoes. But where was Melissa? Melissa Jenkins was born to mother Phil Ann and father Richard on November 23rd, 1978, and she was born in Berlin, Vermont. When she was older, she went on to get her bachelor's degree in natural science, and at the time of her death, she was actually working on getting her master's degree. She was determined, and what's heart-wrenching is that after she was killed, St. Michael's College, which is the college that she went to, actually awarded her her master's degree that she had been going after, and they awarded this to her in 2013. Melissa was a wonderful person and a beloved and respected teacher. She's taught physics in the science department of St. Johnsbury Academy and boarding school. It's an academy and boarding school of about 970 students. And prior to giving birth to her son, she had also coached freshman girls basketball and had been a dorm proctor. During her job as this dorm proctor, she became very close to the dorm students and was said to have a real gift for teaching young people. The headmaster of the school Melissa had worked out said of Melissa, and I quote, "She's got a real gift with students who either haven't liked science before or learning science doesn't come easy to them. She's got a real gift with them." The students in her school loved her, dude. And once she was killed, they went through like a variety of really intense emotions from confusion, numbness, and eventually just straight up anger. People were pissed about what happened to her. She was well-liked, popular, friendly. She was the type of person that literally no one had a bad thing to say about. She was a hardworking woman who had 2 jobs, right? She had her teaching job and she moonlit doing a job as a waitress. She worked at this restaurant called The Creamery, and she had worked there for 2 decades and she was like a teenager. And she did all of this because she was a single mother raising a little boy. You know what I mean? Like, oh, she was kind and warm and friendly. And even though she was working hard at both of her jobs and going to school, she never let the weight of her responsibilities show. She was always smiling and she was seen as a teacher, but also a friend. And she seemed to really care about what she was doing and like she wanted to make a difference. Melissa just loved people and was always willing to help. Her family was like the most important thing to her, and her son Ty was the light of her life. And that's why what happened to her and the fact that her son was left alone in that car by himself after whatever happened to her happened was so horrifying to so many people. And honestly, that's what stuck out to me. When I was reading about this case, the first thing I read was that this woman was missing and her son was found alone in the car. And I was pissed, dude. It made me so mad because it's a little baby and anything could happen. And the people who did this are monsters. Now, back to the scene. Police are there and they are scouring the area for evidence. They go for a half a mile in each direction away from her car, going up and down the road, trying to see if there's anything they could find. But it was dark and they didn't really find anything. And I feel like this case must have been personal to a lot of officers there just because it was such a small town and because Melissa was so well known. She was a longtime local. She had lived there forever. As I said, she was even a waitress at this place when she was a teenager. Some of the officers had gone to the restaurant where she works. They knew her so well. She was like a household name to them. She was a sweet woman who had grown up on a farm and knew how to put in a hard day's work because she worked those two jobs. And they knew that she was someone who loved kids in general. And that's why she was a teacher and she especially loved her child. So they just knew that's never how she would have left her son. So they were very concerned and they took it personally. You know what I'm saying? I think you know what I'm saying. I don't need to explain this. We're all smart here. We get it. Now, of course, the first person they're going to look into when they're looking into this case, right? They're there. They're like, who could it be? The ex-boyfriend. Because one, he's the ex-boyfriend. And how often is it the love interest? Almost always. Two, he's the one who reported her missing and was the last one to speak to her. And three, he literally found her car. So there was a lot of points already against him. But then when they looked into him little bit further, they found that they had broken up and not because he wanted to. So I guess what happened, what made police really, peak up their suspicion against this guy is that Melissa's brother came in, right, to speak to police and let them know anything he might know about her disappearance. So they sit with him and they ask him like when he last talked to her. And he said he had just seen her. She seemed fine. She seemed great. She didn't seem like anything was wrong. So like, okay, did she have any breakups recently? Any bad boyfriends? And this is when the brother mentioned the ex by name. And I guess this ex had like a history of lying to police already. And if that's not bad enough, Melissa's brother also told police that this guy had been pretty upset when Melissa had ended the relationship because he wanted more out of it than she did. So he was questioned about this, obviously, because that's what you do. And he was asked about, like, hey, I heard that you guys were together and, like, you wanted more and she didn't. He's like, yes, okay, yeah. I wanted more out of it. She didn't, but it wasn't bad blood. We were still good friends. We still talked all the time. I guess Melissa's son's father wasn't really in the picture. So this guy was kind of her emotional support system, even if they weren't together. And that's why he was the one that she called when she was going to help these people with a flat tire. Like they were on good terms. But despite that, police were like, were you on good terms though? And they did check his boots that he had been wearing to see if they matched the tracks at the scene and all that jazz. But ultimately, he did end up being ruled out. So they're like, okay, let's go look at another one of Melissa's exes. And this was Melissa's son, Ty's father. His name was BJ, and he lived like several hours away. But did he have the opportunity to drive there? Did maybe he want custody of his son and there was some sort of dispute? Well, he was only looked at for like a second because he had a pretty strong alibi. I guess BJ was seen at his job in Burlington, Vermont, which was like 80 miles away. And police were already kind of feeling like he wasn't their guy because Melissa's son Ty didn't tell police like, oh yeah, daddy took mommy. And like he had enough of a recollection of his father to know who he was and would be able to point him out. And spoiler alert, her son unfortunately did see something, which we are going to get to later. Now, I don't know a ton about BJ, to be honest. That's pretty much the extent of like my knowledge with him. I know that he and Melissa's parents were kind of working out where Ty would end up. And he said that he was working on giving Ty all the love and support he needed when he was with him and just in general at this time, because though at first they weren't sure if he had seen anything and he wasn't really telling police what happened, that would quickly change because, as I said, he did see something that night. It's just so horrific, man. So basically what happened is the day after Melissa went missing, an investigator was brought in who specialized in interviewing children who might have seen something trauma. You can't interview them the same way. So this investigator came in, and at first he was having trouble articulating what he may have seen. He said that the child and Michael Jordan were in the car with his mom, and they were like, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That clearly isn't the situation. Eventually, though, he was able to tell police something. He first said that there were two people who were present at the time that Melissa was taken, and this part just absolutely guts me. This makes me so mad when kids are involved. But he started to cry. He started to pull on his neck, indicating that somebody had done the same thing to mommy. So from this, police were able to put together that there had been two people who had abducted Melissa, and before they did that, they had strangled her. So in response to this, police put a BOLO out on Melissa, and this BOLO was issued statewide. Now, police followed several leads to see if they could find anyone who may have known what happened to Melissa. They went from as far as looking into a plow company who had plowed snow out of her yard one winter to a guy in Maine that she had met on a dating site just recently, to even going to her school and talking to anybody and seeing if maybe there was some gossip around on what might have happened. But it looked like, at least publicly, like none of these leads were panning out. Now, Melissa's car was found just down the road from her home. So police are thinking that it's possible that there's some evidence in her home. Maybe it happened in her home and somebody like dumped the car down the road. And at the very least, they need to go there and see if there's any evidence that could point them in the right direction, because they have like nothing to go on. So, well, they do have something to go on, but we don't know that yet. So they go to the house, they look around, because the issue here is Melissa at this point is considered missing, but they are certain, based on Ty's story, that she's in danger. So they go in and they don't see any sign of a struggle. It doesn't look like anything happened in the home. So they just take some stuff as evidence. They take some papers, they take a business card from a plowing company, and they leave. Now, operating under the assumption that they are looking for a body and not a living woman, the police start changing up their tactics for searching for her, and they start searching rural areas specifically. They start looking into turnoffs, rest stops, ditches, anywhere a person could quickly and easily dump a body without being seen. Officers were encouraged to think of any places they may know of and go and search, and a couple of officers did know a place about 10 miles out of town that was used for fishing, so they headed there. So they get to this boat launch, and it's on the Connecticut River, and it's the river that separates Vermont from New Hampshire. It's not funny. I just felt stupid explaining that. So this was the day after Melissa went missing, and they get there, and while they're looking in the water, they notice something weird. And as they get closer, they realize that it's human feet sticking out of the water. So they're like, oh, and like, this is the worst. Like, we knew we were looking for this, but we were hoping not to find it. So a scuba team had to be called in to go and like retrieve the body that they had found. And I can't even imagine what an awful task that would be. One, because you're going in literally knowing you're going for a body, and two, it was Vermont in like March. I've never been, but it sounds very cold, and I imagine that water was very icy. So they get over to the body, and they find that whoever had put this body there had made attempts to conceal this person, because there were like cinder blocks attached to the body that were meant to weigh her down. There were two cinder blocks that were tied around the waist and then I believe placed on her back. Like, whoever did this really tried to make it so she wouldn't be found from her being weighted down. And then they also had like taken branches off nearby trees, like cut them off at the time and put them on top of her to try to hide her. So once they were able to retrieve her, they pulled her nude body from the water. Her hair was covering her face. But once they moved the hair, it was very clear this was Melissa because of the cold temperature of the water. It had slowed down decomposition. So visually they could see that it was her. Police say that there were also condoms and wrappers found near the body, but it's never been clarified if those had anything to do with what happened to her. There's a little bit of vagueness around that, which we will get into, but it's never been completely confirmed if that was at play here. There was also tire tracks nearby, and they found the trees where the branches had been cut off that were used to hide Melissa's body. So once she was pulled from the water and then taken to have the autopsy performed, like once she was out of the cold temperature of the water, more injuries started to present themselves. They found a bunch of marks on her body. She had clearly gone through hell. She had bruises and contusions all over her from a beating, and some of the bruises looked like they had came from the toes of shoes. And there were also circular marks on her body that appeared to have come from a stun gun. And the medical examiner determined that she had died by manual strangulation. When Melissa's body was found, the community was shocked and outraged and just pissed. Like, they weren't expecting the best news when Ty was found in that car, right? But they were hopeful. And now that she had been found, all of that hope was completely destroyed. They never expected something like this to happen in their town. It was so small, it was so tight-knit. Melissa was so popular that this happening to her gave people a lot of stress, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. And the police did not help people feel better about this, because they told the community, like, stay vigilant, be careful, because we don't know if this is an isolated incident, and we don't know if whoever did this is going to do it again. One of the detectives working this case even made a statement saying, and I quote, "I cannot disclose the details of how the body was found or the condition of the body, but the death is considered suspicious. We don't know if it's an isolated incident. We expect the public to use all diligence and vigilance when out and about." So if I was in that community and that was what I heard after that, I would probably be scared too, if I'm honest with you. After Melissa's body was found, people really came out for a woman who was described as the type of person who would do anything for anyone, a person who would be greatly missed. The Monday after she was killed, more than 100 friends and family members came out in the cold to hold a candlelight vigil in her honor. The school where she worked also canceled classes and handed out pink ribbons in memory of Melissa and in support of her family, because pink was a color that she wore often. Students and staff were encouraged to break dress code and wear pink to school. And luminaires, which are like, those paper bags with candles in them, right? They lined the sidewalks of the academy, some with sweet messages written for Melissa. A memorial service was also held for her at the academy, and the school had plans to make March 30th a day to always remember Melissa. And I don't know if they still do that, but I know a year after she was killed, they had still been doing it. So, I mean, if you're from the area and you know this case, let me know if they still do it every year. I didn't see anything else on it, but that was their plan. So at the ceremony that was a year after she was killed, it was on a Saturday, and there were so many people who showed up, and the whole area was decorated in pink with pink balloons, and they had the phrase "Love Wins" plastered all over the place, all over the school, and on a memorial that was built for Melissa. The headmaster at the school where Melissa worked said that she had actually come up with that phrase, the phrase that they were using to honor her, without even meaning to, because I guess shortly before she was killed, they had a meeting together, and she said that her life motto was to love the people who needed it most, and that after she died, this is something that really resonated with the headmaster, and it was something that he wanted to use, he or she, I can't remember, wanted to use to be the motto at the school and the motto for Melissa, and it was something that they've carried on since. In the headmaster's opinion, it really changed the community at the school for the better. Melissa's cousin Meredith said of this, and I quote, "We cannot let evil and hatred win because love wins. We cannot let ourselves be changed. We will still care, we will still be kind, and we will still be loving." So people really took this time to remember Melissa, but they also took this time to remember Melissa's son, Ty, the son who literally had gone through the worst thing that anybody could ever go through. And he wasn't even young enough to not have it stick in his mind. You know what I mean? That's so horrible. And the people really cared about that. And they even set up I believe it was a trust fund in his honor to help him later down the road as well. Now, police didn't have a ton of leads to go on in the beginning because they had quickly ruled out all of the people that they believed, all the people that were close to her, all the men that were close to her. And they did believe that whoever killed her was somebody who knew her because she was killed by manual strangulation. And that is generally something that is a more personal type of murder. So they finally got some good leads when they got Melissa's cell phone records, because when they looked at it, they did see that she did receive a call from her ex-boyfriend, like he had said, and that she did receive a call prior to her calling her ex-boyfriend, which corroborated his story that somebody had called her needing help on the side of the road. When they looked into the phone number who had called her that night, they realized that the call came from a burner phone, and it was bought 20 miles away from where Melissa was killed. And when they looked into the records of this phone, into the history, they found that that phone had only ever been used to make one single phone call, and that was to Melissa the night she was killed. So that's not good. That doesn't look good, right? And they weren't able to tell who this phone belonged to because it was a burner phone, but they were able to look into the cell phone data, and they could see that this phone had pinged near the area where her car was left and near the area where her body was found. So they were like, oh, this definitely has something to do with something. Now, even though they didn't know who this phone belonged to, they knew where it had been purchased. It was purchased at a store in a place called Littleton, New Hampshire. So police drive over there to see if they can find out if the store person remembered anything. And they knew the exact time and date that the phone was purchased. So they're like, hey, store person, can you please look at the records and tell me if you can tell me anything about the person who bought this phone? And get this phone was purchased with a check. This phone that was used in a murder, that was used to call a girl to lead her to her murder, was purchased with a check. And the person at the store was like, oh, I have a copy of this check. So they get the check, they show it to police, and there's a name on this check. And the name on this check was Patricia Prue. Now, this might not sound familiar to you yet, but it definitely sounded familiar to police. So, who was Patricia Prue? Patricia Prue was a 33-year-old woman who was originally from New York but had moved to Long Island, and that's where she was living. And in 2008, she met a guy on a dating profile named Allen Prue, hence her being hereto known as Patricia Prue. Both Patricia and Allen were looking for love when they met online, and they quickly hit it off and started having a long-distance relationship because Allen was a local guy from a small town in Vermont. He lived in the same area as Melissa. Now, Allen was 30 years old, and he was born and raised in Waterford, Vermont. And he was said to be the type of guy who would do anything for anyone. He was said to be the type of guy who did a lot of odd jobs in the community, whether it be plowing snow to delivering newspapers, and previously he had been a roofer. He was close with his sister, close with his mother. His family was his number one priority, even taking care of his father when he was sick. And when his father died, he stayed home and took care of his mother for his father. His mother described him as a good boy who never got into any trouble, and she said he was a good member of their close-knit family. She also described him as a fixer-upper, and she meant he was the type of guy who would see a problem, see something that needed fixed, and just fixed it. And it wasn't just his family that said he was a good guy. There were people in the community that said he was a good guy too. There was this girl, Jessica, who was like, I don't know if she was a friend of the family or just like a neighbor. And she said that he was a great guy, that he would come over to her elderly parents' house and help like clear their yard and plow their snow without even being asked. She said that if like she had a problem with her lawnmower, she'd call him over and he'd fix it. And that one time he came and picked her up because she couldn't get up like a slippery road. So he drove her home. She said of Allen and Patricia, quote, "It's easy to say these horrible people, but they weren't horrible people." And then end quote. And then she added that once Allen and Patricia got together and got married, that's kind of when they started seeing less of him. Because before that, he'd been ever present in the community. He was, great guy. Everyone knew him, blah, blah, blah. But once he got married, that's when he isolated a little bit, which is totally normal, first off, to like get in a relationship and be like, I'm done being social because I've fulfilled the objective of being social. You know what I mean? But anyway. Allen and Patricia meet online, do the long distance for a while, spending lots of time with emails, phone calls, all that jazz. And it seems like they really were just two lonely souls. She had been in a relationship before she had been married, but it was a bad relationship and it didn't work out. She had some trauma and baggage with that. And Allen had never even really had a girlfriend in his life, so the two really bonded to each other. Now, after a while of doing long distance, Allen and Patricia were finally going to meet in person. So he made the hours-long drive from Vermont to Long Island to pick her up for what was supposed to be a 2-week trip. He was going to bring her to his house for 2 weeks, but I guess they really hit it off because she just never left. They got super serious after meeting in person, and it didn't take them long to get married. Like, they got married pretty soon after. I think they got married the year before Melissa was killed. So they got together in 2008. And she was killed in 2012. So I believe, based on an article I read, that they got married in 2011. So pretty quick after getting together. Actually, that's like a reasonable amount of time. I guess it depends on what you think's reasonable, because me and my husband were together like several years before we got married, but whatever. Now, the two are together, they're married, and it's well on their honeymoon that Patricia lets Allen in on a little secret, and that is that she is bisexual. And she's like, hey, how would you feel about bringing some ladies into the mix? And I guess at first he was a little like apprehensive about it, but let's be honest, it didn't take a lot to convince him to do this. So they started going online and like going on these sites, like swinger sites, trying to meet somebody to come over and, quote, play with them. But there was a problem with this. There was an issue. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but Allen and Patricia lived with Allen's mother. And they lived in like this small mobile home that really wasn't in the best condition. It was an old mobile home. I mean, it was the same one that Allen had grown up in, and he was 30 years old. And the town had even been working with the Prue family. Like, they were like, hey, you need to clean up your property. There was stuff all over the place, scrap metal, piles of old tires and garbage and a camper. Like, they were like, you need to clean it up. And aside from that, the house was super crowded because it was Allen, Patricia, Allen's mom, Allen's mom's boyfriend, Allen's sister, her husband, and their kids. So it was like a full ass house with paper thin walls, and they're wanting to bring like ladies over to have, tete-a-tetes interaction. So it just wasn't like, it wasn't the vibe. Patricia had a solution though, because she was very interested in maintaining this relationship. She wanted this to happen. So she ended up buying a little camper trailer, little guy, little thing. And that's where Allen and Patricia would take their women to have their fun, which was consensual fun for a while. But they were kind of trying to keep it on the DL because they didn't want like anybody to know about it, Allen's family to know about it. But his mom ended up finding out, which this doesn't really matter, but she found out. She's like, okay, just as long as you don't do it in my house, do whatever you want. But the point is, it just wasn't a secret. The two were also very interested in having a baby. They were trying to do the most. They were interested in having a baby, but it turns out that Melissa was having some fertility issues. So they even went through fertility treatments to try to conceive. So that's who they are. That's their backstory. That's how they met. That's how their relationship was forged. That's the stuff they were into, the fact they were having a baby, their living situation. And all of that stuff really, really, really bonded them. They were said to be very codependent is the word that comes to my mind. Very connected, always together. They were together so much that when Allen went back to his seasonal job, which was plowing snow in like the snowy seasons, winter, you know what I'm saying? Patricia would go along with him. She would ride around in the truck with him, and she would do all the paperwork for him, which ended up being a good duo. And because the two of them worked so well together, they were able to do better in business. They were able to take on more clients. And one of these new clients they took on was Melissa Jenkins. So Allen and Patricia became acquainted with Melissa in the winter of 2010. And this is when Melissa hired Allen to plow snow out of her yard. I guess Melissa was super nice and kind to Alan and Patricia, and this was something that they didn't have often happen for them in the community. Like people weren't buddy buddy with them or being super friendly. And she wasn't doing this because she was interested in them, right? She was doing this because she was a nice person, a nice neighbor, a sweet woman, a sweet mother. You know what I mean? But they took it as her being interested in them, her flirting with them, and they were both very attracted to her. And it seems like they got a little bit of an obsession with her, not just because of her physically, but because of what she represented, because she was this beautiful woman who was very well loved. She was a mother and they wanted a family. And it just seems like this weird web of obsession and bullshit. Like, okay, for example, one of the things I read even said that Patricia and Alan didn't even decide that they wanted to try to have a baby till after they met Melissa because they wanted to have what she had. I don't know how accurate that is, but that is something I read. So it is something I am putting in here so that you can know all the layers to this fucked up cake. Anyways, back to being at the store and looking at the check and seeing the name Patricia Prue. And why did this sound so familiar to police? Well, we're going back to the night that she went missing when Randy took a phone call from Melissa where she said she was meeting somebody stuck on the side of the road that needed some help. So basically, when she went missing and she called Randy, she was like, I don't know the name of the people I'm meeting, but it's this couple that once helped me plow snow out of my yard. Let me pull out the business card so I can tell you the name of the business in case something goes wrong. And the business card said, Good News Prue Snow Plowing and Towing Services. And then, police went to her house and they found the papers and the business card and they took it into evidence. This business card was sitting on her counter. So police had already been looking into the Prues. The day after Melissa was murdered, before her body was found, police had actually gone over to the Prue home to interview him in the early morning hours. And when they showed up there, Alan and Patricia were already awake because I guess Alan also did a paper route. So the two were interviewed, and they both said that they had not seen Melissa. They hadn't seen her in a while, and they gave police permission to search their home and to search their vehicles. And after police did that, they left. But then police were surprised when later that day, Alan and Patricia came to the police station of their own free will. But were they there to talk about Melissa? No, no, no. They were there to report to police that they believed that somebody had stolen Patricia's identity. Like they believed that somebody had stolen her checkbook, and they believed that it was her ex-husband, Jeffrey, who had done this. So Jeffrey, Patricia's ex-husband, he said that the two were married and that they separated in 2007 and then got divorced in 2009. He's like, I haven't talked to her really since then, so I don't know what she's talking about. He did say that at one point she called him like over and over and over, and he didn't answer. And then he called her back, and she's like, why the fuck you called me, bro? So she was kind of weird. He did say that he was shocked about this, like when it came out, everything that happened, that he was blown away that even though they didn't have a good relationship and that she did have mental health issues, he never would have considered that she could murder somebody. He said that she had anxiety and depression and things like that, but he never knew her to be like a violent person. So anyways, Alan and Patricia are there saying that Patricia's checks have been stolen. But really what they're there to do is to cover their tracks because they realized when police came to speak to them that they had made a mistake and that they had gotten caught. And they're like, we used a check. And they even admitted later that the reason they were there was to also kind of see what police knew. And it's really stupid because I believe by this point, the police had already gotten her check and they knew that these two were involved. So they're sitting there telling police like, hey, my checks are stolen. And police are like, that's interesting because like, we know you're lying, but okay. But police humor them a bit. They bring them in, they talk to them, they offer them water, they take the cups afterwards to keep them for DNA evidence, and they kind of talk to them a little bit. And then finally the officer completely redirects the conversation to Melissa. And he's like, hey, did you see that girl, Melissa, who's missing? Do you know anything about that? Do you know her? And they're like, oh yeah, we did see that. We did see that she's missing, but we knew her, we know her, but we haven't seen her in a really long time. We don't know her that well, deflecting a lot. The cop was like, oh, that's cool. Well, where were you on the night of March 25th? Like we're trying to kind of see what's going on with you. And they were like, oh, we were together. We ran errands in Littleton. We went through a drive-thru and got dinner. And then we went home and we were in bed by 7:30 p.m. fast asleep as a couple. Nothing to see here. Then Patricia quickly turns the conversation back to her, identity theft thing, saying that, she thinks it was her ex-husband who did it because he's been trying to track her down. And now he's missing. He's left the county. And the cop's like, listen, that doesn't sound like he's missing. Missing is that girl on TV. Because, he really knows that they've done this. He suspects that they've done this. He's trying to make them break. And they actually did record this interview. Like, you can watch footage of it, and I did. And when that happens, when he, switches back, he's not missing, she's missing. Patricia looks scared to me. She looks like she's like, oh, fuck. Like they know something. And Allen is just sitting there sweating bullets, even though it wasn't even hot in the room, which I wasn't there to know that it wasn't hot in the room. But they even said like he was sweating bullets and it wasn't hot in the room. So that's happening. But even though the officer knows in his bones that they're responsible, he also feels like right now is not the time to take this from a, interview to an interrogation. So he just lets them leave, lets them stew with the conversation they just had. But what they don't know is that they're now put under surveillance. They're the number one suspects, and their story, their alibi, is being corroborated and disputed. Now, it didn't take police long to completely pick apart their story because they're dumb. Like, I'm sorry, but like, come on. First, they got the video surveillance from where the store. What? First, they got the video surveillance from the store where the burner phone was purchased. And when they looked at the surveillance footage, they saw Allen and Patricia buying the phone, not her husband. You see them just hanging out in the aisles, leisurely looking at the phones, picking out the perfect one, going up to the cash register at Walmart, by the way, buying the phone and some other items with a check, where you also have to give your ID and your date of birth. I'm not trying to give you ideas, but man. Next, police were able to get the surveillance footage from where the two got dinner. You remember they said they went through like a drive-thru? I don't know if I said they went through a drive-thru. Well, they did. They went to Burger King to get their Impossible Whoppers, I'm sure. They don't actually seem like they're vegetarians. I love an Impossible Whopper, but they go through and they get Burger King. And on the surveillance footage, on the video, you see Allen wearing the black and red baseball hat that was found near Melissa's car when her car was found and she was missing. So, the following day, on March 27th, Allen and Patricia were invited back to the police station under the guise of further discussing their identity fraud case. But once they were brought in, they were separated and interviewed separately. Separated. And Patricia stood strong. She was like, I have nothing to do with this. I don't know what you're talking about. Even when she was shown images from the surveillance video that showed her stupid face buying the phone, she pulled a Shaggy and she was like, it wasn't me. But Allen was a little worse under pressure. They immediately start asking him about Melissa, and he's like, don't get me wrong, don't take this wrong, but like, why are you talking to me? I don't really understand why I'm being questioned about this at all. And they were like, we're just trying to put together your timeline. You don't have a problem providing that for us, do you? At this, he says he can't really remember what he did that day. He said he's the type of person that doesn't really pay attention to what he does or where he goes, and he doesn't really remember most days, which is convenient. But also, I get it because my husband just asked me what we did last Wednesday, and I was like, what is Wednesday? The cops then say to him, like, listen, man, we know that you're lying. We have a ton of evidence against you, and we know that you were involved in this. All we need you to do is tell us the how and the why. We can help you, man. You really need to let me help you. And then they tell him about everything they have. We're like, we have the video surveillance from Walmart. We have the video surveillance from Burger King where you're wearing the hat that was at the scene where Melissa was taken. And we have your DNA that we got from that cup, and it matches the DNA on the hat. He then tells police that he is scared shitless. And then he says something that I found to be really weird. He said he was the type of guy that liked to spit shake. He liked to spit shake to say that he was telling the truth. And the cop was like, so do you want to like spit shake, bro? And he's like, actually, yeah. So they do. And I was like, what is happening? What is interrogations? What are interrogations? It was at this point that he started telling them everything. He told police about his and Patricia's threesomes and that they often wanted to get girls to play with, and they had always been consensual, but they'd been getting a little bored, so they wanted to find a better girl. He then tells them that he and Patricia had an obsession with Melissa. They thought that she was perfect. And Allen apparently had even gone as far as asking Melissa out on dates, and she turned him down. And they talked to a friend of hers actually about this, and apparently Melissa told the friend that he like really weirded her out when he asked her out, so she turned him down and had him stop plowing her yard. She was like, I need to cut ties with this completely. But then he showed up at her house. This is gonna blow your mind. He showed up at her house. This man who worked for her showed up at her house drunk one night in autumn of, I think it was 2011, and was like, can I please plow your yard next? I don't know why I did that voice, but can I please plow your yard next winter? And she's like, what is happening? She thought he was so weird. He then says that the night that they murdered Melissa, Patricia had called her under the guise of her and Allen needing help, that their car had broken down or like their tire was flat on the side of the road. And they knew she was a good person, so they knew that she would come. And they were hoping that when she showed up, they would just ask her like, hey, Are you interested in being her third? And they thought that she would just be down with that sickness. Now, this is so messed up, and I don't understand what happened, like what went wrong here. But he said that that night, when Melissa pulled her car in front of theirs and got out and approached them, they never even asked her. They never asked her if she wanted to be involved with them. He said he just immediately started strangling her. He said that he just wasn't in his right mind. He didn't feel like himself. And the next thing he knew, she was on the ground and he was strangling her. He didn't say anything to her. He just attacked her. He said that Melissa fought back, but that he was able to overpower her. And when she was unconscious, he and Patricia dragged her back and put her in their car before they were about to take off. And they did all of this in front of her son. And they said they had no idea that the baby was there until the deed was done. But then when the deed was done, they were like, well, we got to go. So they just left and left the baby there and took off with Melissa in their car. And Allen said that while they were driving, Patricia started strangling Melissa further just to make sure she was gone. The two then take Melissa's body back to their house, which is so chaotic, covered in trash and debris. It just stresses me out. And they get some cinder blocks, which are near the property, and they already had rope in their car. They then drove Melissa to the river. They dragged her onto a tarp. They took off her clothes and dumped bleach all over her body to get rid of evidence and to try to get rid of fingerprints. And they tied the blocks to her and tied her wrists and ankles. They then threw her in the water, hoping that the cinder blocks would be enough to keep her weighted down. So they stood on the edge of the water and they watched. And they saw her float to the surface and they panicked. So they went and started cutting branches off nearby trees and just covered her body, hoping this would be enough to conceal what they had done. They then leave. They took the tarp, their clothes, her clothes, their boots, a blanket, and other stuff to New Hampshire, where they burned the evidence, pouring kerosene on all the items and setting them on fire. And then they went home so that Allen could get ready for his paper route, and he was an hour late to work that day. When asked what he would like to say to Melissa if he had the opportunity, like, what would you say to her now? He said that he would apologize to her, that she was a nice lady and she didn't deserve what happened to her, that she deserved to live a long and happy life and watch her baby grow up, which, fuck you, Allen. And then he started to cry and said that he was terrified of going to jail. When police asked him why he killed Melissa, like why he did this to her, he said he had no idea. He had no idea why he did what he did, that he didn't feel like himself, and that it just, he was no clue. Wow, don't know why I did this. And then when police asked him if he had violated her, and as I said, I didn't get a clear answer on this. There were condoms found at the area, but there was no clarity in the reporting. He simply responded to them that the autopsy should have proven that. So do with that information what you will. After confessing, he agreed to take the police to all the locations where they could find evidence. He took them to the spot in New Hampshire where they had burned all the items. He took them to an area near the water where the boat launch was to show them where they threw the phone so police could retrieve that. He took them to where the body was left. And in doing this, not only did he confess, but in going to all these locations, he corroborated his own confession. So Allen and Patricia Prue were both arrested and charged with second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and kidnapping. It was eventually raised to first-degree murder for Allen and aggravated murder for Patricia because they believed that she had either sexually assaulted or tried to sexually assault Melissa. Man, when it came out that they did it and that he was local and it was him and his wife and that they had lured her and used her kindness to lure her to her death, people were shocked, dude. Anyway, shortly after the arrest, police descended on the Prue property to get as much evidence as they could because of the confession and everything. And this wasn't an easy task because remember, all of Allen's family lived there and they did not believe that police had the right people. They were convinced that they were barking up the wrong tree because they hadn't heard this confession yet. His mom said that she did not believe he had done this, that she just did not think he had it in him and that her son was not the monster they were saying that he was. And his sister Donna said the same thing, that neither him nor Patricia were the monsters that police were saying they were, and that they were being falsely accused. His sister said of this, quote, "I wish I could do something to prove that they really didn't do it. And I hope that the cops aren't willing to give up and try to find more evidence that they really didn't do it instead of wrongly accusing somebody." But again, this was before the confession and all the evidence was released, so I can't even imagine how they must have felt after, since they were so sure that he wasn't involved. And then to hear his own words and to know what he said, to know what he did, that must have been very difficult. But anyways, they're arrested, they're held without bail, and despite Allen actually confessing, as we know he did, he and Patricia both pled not guilty to all their charges. And now, they each had separate trials, and Allen's came first. At first, Allen's attorney tried to get the confession thrown out. Like right away, he's like, let's try to have this confession disappear because if that happens, like, we're cool. But the judge was like, Absolutely not. So Allen changed his tactic and he did something very interesting. He was like, listen, I didn't do any of it. It was all Patricia. And this was an interesting tactic. And a legal analyst actually came out. This is something I found interesting. A legal analyst came out and they weren't sure if this was what he was trying to do, but this was something that this could be. They were thinking that, like, this could be very interesting because they're husband and wife. That Allen could, since his trial was first, say that he had nothing to do with it, that it was all Patricia. Then he could get acquitted. And then when she went to her trial, he could testify on her behalf, like for the defense, and be like, actually, I did everything. And then get her acquitted, and then they'd both go free. I was like, whoa, I would have never thought of that. Can you even imagine? That'd be wild, but that's not what happened here. Basically, Allen just said, or Allen's attorney on Allen's behalf just said that Allen was there, but he had nothing to do with it. It was all Patricia, that Patricia hated Melissa, that she was so jealous of her, it put her in a rage. And they even said that Patricia had a multiple personality disorder and that one of her other personalities killed Melissa, and that Allen had no idea it was going to happen. He thought they were just inviting her over for the fun, and that Patricia just freaked out and killed her herself. At his trial, his mother did testify on his behalf and tried to corroborate this, saying that Patricia believed that Allen and Melissa were having an affair and that she was incredibly jealous. And his attorney tried to say that Allen had a low IQ and that his low IQ made it easy for him to be manipulated by his wife. So first, he had no idea it was going to happen. Now he's being manipulated. Whatever. They talked about his stunted social skills and his controlling father who made it impossible for him to meet people. So naturally, he'd want to keep his wife happy and do whatever he could for her, which is why he admitted to being responsible in the first place. He took the blame for her, but he also said it was kind of coerced. Now, Patricia was summoned to testify at Allen's trial, but she invoked her Fifth Amendment rights and would not say anything. She basically just confirmed her name and her address and would say nothing more, which is big for her considering he was literally throwing her under the bus and blaming her for everything. But it wasn't successful for him anyway. Ultimately, despite his best efforts, Allen was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and kidnapping with the intent to commit sexual assault. And Allen said of this, and I quote, "I feel terrible about what's happened here. I can't imagine what Melissa's family is going through. I just wanted to tell the court that I'm convicted of a crime that I did not commit, nor did I have anything to do with it. The only thing I am guilty of is bringing the person that did this crime to Vermont. And for that, I'm truly sorry." That's it. But the judge called bullshit on that, was like, absolutely not. You were the primary aggressor, Mr. Allen Prue, and you two worked as a pair. Next was going to be his sentencing hearing because it didn't happen on the same day. And during the sentencing hearing, so many people wanted to be there, man. Everyone wanted to see what happened. A bunch of people from Melissa's school came. It was packed. It was so packed that the line to get in to the courtroom wound down 2 flights of stairs to the first floor. Everyone wanted to see what this guy was going to get. And it definitely didn't disappoint because Allen Prue was sentenced to 50 years to life for the murder, life for the kidnapping, and an additional 5 years for the conspiracy. The way that it was structured essentially meant that Allen will have to serve at least 50 years and won't be eligible for parole until he's 82 years old. He was also told that he couldn't speak to Patricia until both of their cases were complete. And I guess this is because they found letters between Allen and Patricia where they were talking about the case. So they're like, you're done, but you two still can't talk until she's done. After hearing his sentence, Allen hung his head and cried tears only for himself, while those who loved her cried tears for Melissa. Now, let's talk about Patricia's trial. Patricia did have a couple of interesting things come out at her trial. Basically, what happened is there was testimony given by somebody who had been in jail with Patricia, another jail mate. What is the word? Fellow inmate. Wow, why couldn't I think of that word? Jesus. Well, this fellow inmate said that Patricia was a big talker. She loved to tell everyone everything that happened. So apparently Patricia was telling people that the reason they chose Melissa is because they thought she was beautiful. They thought she was perfect. They were both so attracted to her. But on top of that, Patricia had some salty feelings towards Melissa. She felt like Melissa had kind of brushed them off and screwed them over by not using Allen's plowing service again and not recommending him to other people. So they're wildly attracted to her, but she also kind of hates her. And then she told people that she strangled Melissa. She was the one who strangled Melissa while Allen sexually assaulted her. They also submitted pages from her diary where she talked about some stuff. It was kind of vague, though. It was like vague writings about like fantasies that her and Allen both had. They weren't super strong, but they definitely didn't look good when you pair it next to what they were going to trial for, right? And she also wrote that she had plans for people who had wronged her and that people would be surprised what she was capable of. And this was all bad. It was, but it was all very much strengthened by the fact that Patricia, who claimed she had no involvement with this whatsoever, remember, had Googled how to kidnap a girl. She'd Googled how to kidnap a girl. The two had went out and got a stun gun. They got a burner phone. And it was Patricia herself who called Melissa that night, luring her to her death. Now, initially, the issue is that Patricia was going to try to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. She and her attorney were like working the angle that she had dissociative personality disorder and that it wasn't her. You know what I mean? But a doctor ended up investigating her. What's the word? Meeting with her? Evaluating her. Doctor evaluated her and found that she was competent to stand trial. So they were like, this is not going to work for us. So they actually met with the prosecution and they came up with a plea deal. I think that Patricia knew that she was screwed. She knew her goose was cooked, and that's why she took this deal. Essentially, Patricia ended up pleading guilty to a lesser charge of aggravated attempted murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Now, I think there were more reasons as to why she ended up taking this plea deal. I think it was more than just her goose being cooked. She said that she did it because she didn't want to put Melissa's family through a trial, saying, quote, "I stand here before you today willing to give my freedom for the loss of her life. I've asked for life without the possibility of parole. That's how I want to show you that I'm deeply and profoundly sorry for whatever part I played in the death of your family member." Which, okay, that sounds pretty, you did a solid. But the thing was, she also said that the reason that she ended up taking this plea deal is because she wanted to speak to Allen. Because you remember they weren't allowed to talk to each other until her trial was done, and she knew trials could take forever. So she just wanted to make the plea deal and get it done with so she could talk to her husband. Even though he blamed her for the entire murder, she could not get enough of him. And it was all stupid and pointless anyway, because the two ended up divorcing in 2017. So, was it really this important? Come on, man. Bruh. So with her plea deal, Patricia got life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder, life in prison for the kidnapping, and 4 to 5 years for the conspiracy. Which sounds like a really shitty deal and good because she's a shitty person. During her sentencing, she finally did apologize to Melissa's family, saying that she wasn't sorry she got caught. She was genuinely sorry for what she did, and she said she just wished she had gotten help for her mental health issues earlier. And then she said, quote, "I want to apologize personally for the fact that my husband wasn't a strong enough human being to admit his wrongdoings and be able to take his rightful punishment willingly." So she apologized for him. The judge told Patricia that they hope there isn't a day that goes by that she doesn't have to relive her evilness in prison, and said that you can, apologize for him all you want, but you were the catalyst that made all of this happen. Her attorney did try to use the fact that she had mental health issues and this happened to try to push that there needs to be more interventions in these situations and to get people help for their mental health issues earlier, which is a good sentiment, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it doesn't really do much here, right? And plus, her mental health issues weren't going to be discussed at trial anyway, so it seems like he was just trying to do whatever he could do. But that is a good point. Maybe that could be something we could do so that these types of things couldn't happen. But I'm not in a position. It just seems obvious. But let's not get into all that right now. Now, I'm not sure how Melissa's family felt about the sentences that the two got. I didn't see any reports about that. I know that they said that they just wanted justice for Melissa, and not just for Melissa, but also Melissa's son, her brother, her sister, her mother, her father, her family, her friends. They just wanted justice for everybody. And I don't know if this is what that looks like for them. You know what I mean? It's really hard. I don't know what they want. I don't know what would make it feel palatable, but I hope they're able to find some peace. That is what my biggest hope for them is, that they can find some peace. And speaking of which, I know that Allen and Patricia have both filed appeals. Allen argued that his confession and his wife's internet history should not have been used or considered during his trial. And there were a couple of other issues raised as well, but ultimately his appeal was unanimously rejected. But as for Patricia, and this is more recent, as of 2021, she's asking for her conviction to be thrown out, claiming that there was misconduct by her prosecutor, the judge, and her own defense attorney. And she says that she had ineffective counsel and that she was under extreme stress and couldn't effectively aid in her own defense. Now, as of the day that I'm filming this, there hasn't been any update on that. It was fairly recent that she, filed this appeal. I can't imagine that it's going to be successful, and we have to hope for the best for Melissa's family's sake, because It just sucks that this has to be brought up again after all these years. You know what I mean? It's been, what, 11 years since it happened now, and this woman's still like being a bitch. Sorry, but not sorry, but she is. And it just sucks because her family has already been through so much. And I haven't even told you one of the worst things that happened besides losing their daughter. Richard and Phil Ann, Melissa's parents, ended up filing a lawsuit against a TV station. I believe they were affiliated with CBS because in 2014, when they were airing like footage of the trial against Allen, I believe, they showed a photo on the news of Melissa's body. So the station was covering Allen's trial, and during the trial, this photo was used as evidence. So the news station used this photo in their broadcasting, and it was on the screen for like several seconds, and her family saw this. I guess the station did apologize to the family and said it was a technical malfunction and it would never happen again. It shouldn't have happened. But her family said that the damage was done and that the station like never reached out to them again after that to see if they were okay or what happened. And they were just really upset with the whole situation. The station claims that they never meant to air the photo, which I gotta be honest, I kind of think that they probably did because, like, what is it? What is the phrase? If it bleeds, it leads or whatever. Like, I think that they probably did and that they didn't think they would get in trouble. But they did say that, like, they changed their review process after that and that every bit of controversial or upsetting material needs to be looked at by 2 pairs of eyes so that you can see if there's any issues, blah, 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 blah. But as far as I know, the station doesn't even exist anymore, so it's not even, like their new review process. They don't even exist anymore, as far as I know. I know they were bought out, and I didn't see that they exist anymore. But anyway, I just can't imagine that. I can't imagine how horrible that would be to lose your daughter that way and then to be like, to see that and to know that happened. It's just disrespectful. It's gross. They've just been through so much. In this case, man, it's just so sad. Like, why did Alan and Patricia do this? They say that they just wanted to, have some girl to have some fun with it. It was going to be consensual, that they never intended to do anything by force. But I call complete bullshit on that. Like, they literally got a burner phone to call her, which they only use for that purpose. They got a stun gun. It just seems incredibly planned to me. And there was this man named John Paul St. Clair who worked for the state police, which, wow, what a name. But he agreed. He said that he believes that they went out with the intention of kidnapping a woman and keeping her as like a sex slave so that they can continually assault her. And to me, that seems far more likely than the bullshit that they're trying to spin. And it's just really, really horrifying to consider that. And if that was their plan, like what went wrong? Like so much went wrong here, obviously, but what made it go this wrong? It seems like they were planning to take her and make her a sex slave, and they had no idea her son was there. It doesn't even seem like they initially meant to kill her, but things spiraled. Both of them were obsessed with Melissa. How scary is that? How could she have ever known? She barely knew them. She was just trying to help since they were down the road from her house. Like, what the fuck, man? They were infatuated with her because she was beautiful and kind and took the time to talk to them and always paid them on time and had this adorable son and was a beautiful mother. And speaking of her son, because I want to end this on a positive note, I will say that I don't really know what's going on with him now. I didn't want to look him up. I feel like that would be intrusive. Because at this point, he's like a teenager and like he deserves to live his life and be left alone, in my opinion. But the last reporting I did see said that he was very loved, that he was being incredibly loved by both sides of his family. And I think that's incredibly important and meaningful, especially since he lost such a loving mother. And with that, my friends, is the story of the horrific murder of Melissa Jenkins. I hope it was informative and it made sense and that I gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for remembering Melissa with me today. Now, considering everything I've told you during this video, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that is this. Who do you believe was the mastermind or the primary aggressor in the murder of Melissa Jenkins? Was it Patricia? Was it Allen? Who was the one who made this happen? And do you think it was planned? Do you think they planned to kill her? Like, what was going on here? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Anyways, guys, before you leave, please don't forget to leave me a comment down below letting me know what cases you'd like to see me cover in the future. As this case indicates, if you leave me a suggestion, I like to put it on a list and try to cover it. And I put your name on the list so I can give you a shout out if I do cover it. I love looking into the cases you guys are into because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you would not be here. If you haven't already, of course, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below for your convenience, along with a link to my membership, where you can get early access to non-sponsored videos, priority comment responses, things like that. And now with all that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.